Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Love series, episode 26.
Oh, wow. Episode 26 already.
I know, right? Time flies when you're exploring the dark side of love.
It really does. So what captivating and heartbreaking story are we diving into today?
Today, it's the Sonipat Honor Killing of 2012.
I've heard of this case, but I'm really interested to hear more about the details.
Yeah, and we'll be looking at the clash between love and tradition and how societal pressures can lead people to do extreme things.
It's a case that really makes you think about the darker side of cultural norms.
Definitely. So let's set the scene.
Right.
We're in Sonipat, Haryana, a region in India where caste and family honor are extremely important.
Right, and those factors played a huge role in this case. It's where Jyoti Sharma and Ankit Yadav's love story unfolded.
Jyoti and Ankit, their names are forever linked to this tragedy.
Sadly, yes. Can you tell us more about them, who they were?
Well, I don't know about you, but I always find it helpful to understand the victims as individuals.
Yeah.
To get a sense of who they were before the tragedy.
I agree completely. It makes the story much more impactful.
Exactly. So Jyoti was a bright, ambitious college student.
Sounds like she had a promising future.
She really did. People described her as full of life, determined to make her own way.
It's so sad that her life was cut short.
It really is. And then there's Ankit. He was known for his quiet strength and his loyalty to his loved ones.
They sound like a lovely couple. It makes you wonder why their love story ended in such a horrific way.
Well, their love crossed caste lines, and that's where the trouble began.
Ah, yes, caste. It's a complex system. And in many parts of India, crossing those lines is considered a grave offense.
It is. And for Jyoti's family, it was completely unacceptable. To them, it was a stain on their honor.
So when they found out about the relationship...
They were furious. They basically imprisoned Jyoti in her own home. They threatened Ankit and told him to stay away.
Wow, talk about intense pressure. It must have been incredibly difficult for them.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine being torn between the person you love and the demands of your family.
It's a heartbreaking situation. And in this case, it led to a desperate decision.
They decided to elope.
Elopement. It's often seen as a romantic gesture. But in this context, it was an act of defiance.
It was their attempt to escape the control of her family and build a life together on their own terms.
But sadly, their attempt at freedom would trigger a chain of events that would seal their fate.
It fueled her family's rage and their determination to restore their honor, no matter the cost.
That's a terrifying thought, the lengths people will go to for honor.
It really is.
Yeah.
And in this case, it would lead to a truly horrific outcome. But we'll have to delve into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, their elopement basically just threw gasoline on the fire. It just shattered any hope of reconciliation.
Right. It was seen as the ultimate betrayal, like a slap in the face to their family and their entire community.
Exactly. And their family decided they had to take action.
So what did they do? How did they go about tracking down the couple?
Well, they were consumed by rage and this, twisted sense of righteousness. So they basically used every resource they had.
Like what specifically?
They leveraged their connections, tapped into that network of relationships within their community. They were determined to find Jyoti and Ankit and bring them back no matter what.
It's scary how quickly things escalated. It went from, family disapproval to a full-blown manhunt.
I know, it's chilling. And meanwhile, Jyoti and Ankit were on the run, terrified, and just trying to find a safe place to hide.
It's like a real-life thriller playing out.
Yeah.
You've got the couple desperately seeking refuge, while the family is closing in on them, driven by anger and vengeance.
And sadly, this chase would lead to a very, very dark confrontation.
What happened when they finally caught up with the couple?
Jyoti's family found them hiding at a relative's house. But instead of, resorting to violence right away, they came up with a really cruel plan.
What do you mean?
They pretended to forgive Jyoti and Ankit. They acted like they'd accepted the situation and wanted them to come home.
Oh, wow. So they lured them back with false promises of peace and reconciliation.
Exactly. It was a complete deception, a way to get them back into their control.
It's just so manipulative and heartbreaking to think about. Jyoti and Ankit probably felt a glimmer of hope that maybe everything would be okay.
Right. They must have thought that maybe their families were finally coming around.
But it was all a lie, a carefully crafted trap.
Sadly, yes. On the night of June 11, 2012, Jyoti's family put their plan into action. They took the couple to a secluded location far away from anyone who could help.
It's just bone-chilling to think about what was going through Jyoti and Ankit's minds at that moment. They must have realized that something was terribly wrong.
It's unimaginable the fear they must have felt.
And then what happened?
Jyoti's father and brother, they just snapped. They attacked Ankit, beating him brutally with iron
Oh
rods.
my God.
Jyoti was forced to watch as they beat the man she loved, and then they turned on her and strangled her to death.
It's just too horrific for words. Two young people full of dreams and love just brutally murdered by the people who were supposed to love and protect them.
It's a stark reminder of how dangerous these so-called honor killings can be, how twisted traditions can lead to such senseless violence.
It really is. So after the murders, what did the family do? Did they try to cover up their crime?
They did. They tried to make it look like Jyoti and Ankit had just vanished. They dumped their bodies in a field hoping they'd never be found.
Wow, they really thought they could get away with it.
It seems so. But of course, the disappearance of a young couple, especially under such suspicious circumstances, was bound to raise questions.
Right. So how did the news of their murders break, and what was the reaction from the community?
Well, at first there were just whispers, people wondering what had happened to them. But then the rumors turned into accusations and the fear turned into outrage. Their bodies were found bearing the marks of a brutal attack. And that's when everything changed.
It must have been a huge shock to the community. This wasn't just a random crime. It was a cold-blooded honor killing.
Exactly. And it forced everyone to confront this horrific reality.
So how did the police respond to this case? How did they go about investigating such a complex and sensitive issue?
Well, the Sonipat police knew they had a tough job ahead of them. They were dealing with a double homicide. But it was also a challenge to these deeply ingrained cultural practices that had been ignored for far too long.
So where did they start?
They started by trying to understand Jyoti and Ankit's lives. They interviewed their friends, neighbors, relatives, anyone who could shed light on their relationship and the events leading up to their disappearance.
It sounds like a very thorough investigation.
It was. They needed to gather as much information as possible to build a strong case.
And did they get any cooperation from the community?
They did. People were horrified by the brutality of the murders, and many were willing to talk to the police. They wanted to see justice served.
So the community played a key role in helping the police piece together the puzzle.
They did. Their testimonies provided crucial insights into the family dynamics, the threats, and the escalating tensions that led to the murders.
It's good to hear that people were willing to speak up. But eyewitness testimony can be unreliable. Did the police find any physical evidence to support those accounts?
They did. The forensic evidence was actually crucial in this case.
Like what, for example?
The autopsy reports confirmed that Jyoti had been strangled and Ankit had been severely beaten, consistent with the witness statements.
So the physical evidence corroborated the testimonies. It's starting to sound like a pretty solid case.
It was. And there's more. They found DNA evidence and fingerprints at the crime scene that directly linked Jyoti's father and brother to the murders.
Wow, that's pretty damning evidence. It seems like they weren't very careful about covering their tracks.
They weren't. They even tried to clean up the crime scene, but they missed some key details.
So with all this evidence mounting up, what happened next? Did the police make any arrests?
They did. Jyoti's father and brother were arrested and faced with the undeniable proof of their actions.
So what was their reaction? Did they confess to the crime?
They did confess. Under interrogation, they admitted to killing Jyoti and Ankit.
I can't even imagine what that interrogation must have been like. Did they show any remorse, any understanding of the gravity of what they had done?
No, not at all. Their confessions were cold and detached. They still clung to this twisted notion of honor.
So how did they justify their actions?
They claimed that Jyoti had brought dishonor upon their family by choosing to love someone outside her caste. They argued that they had to restore their honor, even if it meant taking lives.
It's just mind-blowing how they could twist the concept of honor to justify such brutality. It's like they were living in a different reality.
It is a very different worldview. And sadly, it's a worldview that still persists in some parts of the world.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
But thankfully, in this case, justice would prevail. But that's a story for the next part of our deep dive.
It is a different reality. But thankfully, in this case, their justifications wouldn't hold up in court.
Right. The trial that followed their confessions was a huge turning point, not just for Jyoti and Ankit's case, but for how honor killings were viewed in India.
Yeah, it really put a spotlight on this issue and forced people to confront it.
Can you describe the atmosphere surrounding the trial?
It was intense. The media coverage was massive. Everyone was following the case, and the courtroom itself was packed with people every day.
I can imagine. It must have felt like the weight of the entire nation was bearing down on that courtroom.
It did. The prosecution did a fantastic job. They presented a very strong case, emphasizing the premeditation and the brutality of the murders.
And how did the defense respond? Did they try to use cultural arguments to justify the killing?
Of course they did. They tried to paint Jyoti's family as victims, claiming that their honor had been tarnished. They argued that the killings were a consequence of their cultural beliefs.
So basically, they were trying to get away with murder by saying it was tradition.
Yeah, pretty much. But the court wasn't having it.
Good. The judge basically said that no cultural or religious belief could ever justify taking innocent lives.
Exactly. He was very clear that honor killings are murders, plain and simple, and the law would treat them as such.
That's a powerful statement. It sends a clear message that these kinds of killings will not be tolerated.
It does. And it set a precedent for future cases.
So what was the verdict?
In 2014, 2 years after the murders, Jyoti's father and brother were found guilty of murder and sentenced to death.
Wow, that's a strong sentence. It must have brought some sense of justice to Jyoti and Ankit's loved ones.
I think it did. It showed that the justice system was finally taking honor killings seriously.
But as we've been discussing, laws alone can't completely solve this problem. Did the Sonipat case have a lasting impact on societal attitudes?
It did. It definitely raised awareness and sparked a lot of important conversations about honor killings. It forced people to question these traditions and to see the human cost of these acts.
So it wasn't just a legal victory, it was a cultural shift as well.
Yes. And it gave courage to activists and reformers who were already fighting against this practice. It gave them a platform and a voice.
It's amazing how one case can have such a ripple effect. It shows the power of speaking out and demanding justice.
It really does. And it's a reminder that change is possible even when dealing with deeply ingrained traditions.
So what happened next? Did the momentum from the Sonipat case lead to any concrete actions?
It did. There was a push for stronger laws and better support systems for potential victims. Organizations working to combat honor killings gained more visibility and support.
So it sounds like a real turning point in the fight against honor-based violence.
I think it was, but the fight is far from over. Honor killings still happen, and there's a lot of work to be done to change mindsets and protect vulnerable individuals.
That's a sobering thought. But it's important to remember the progress that's been made and to keep fighting for a world where love and individual choice triumph over outdated traditions.
Absolutely. Jyoti and Ankit's story is a tragic reminder of what's at stake, but it's also a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and the pursuit of justice.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Sonipat honor killing. It's been a heavy but important conversation.
It has, and it's a conversation that needs to continue.
If you've been moved by this story, we encourage you to learn more about honor-based violence and support organizations working to combat it.
Even small actions can make a difference. Raising awareness, educating others, speaking out against these practices, every little bit helps.
And of course, don't forget to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle for more deep dives into crime stories that matter.
We'll be back soon with another captivating case.
Until then, stay curious and stay safe.